The night of the falling sky. The first time Alara saw the star. She was 9 years old. It was a cold night in the small coastal town of Liran. The kind of night when the wind carried the taste of salt and the promise of something about to happen. Her father had woken her gently. "Come on," he whispered, pulling back the thin curtains. "The sky's falling tonight." Outside, the world shimmered, the sea was dark silver, and the horizon glowed faintly as if the stars themselves had leaned closer to watch. They walked barefoot across the damp sand. The town slept behind them, quiet, dream-heavy, but the sky was awake, restless. Then the first one fell. A streak of white fire tore through the dark, so close that Alara could almost hear it hiss. Then another, and another. Her father laughed softly. "A meteor shower," he said. "They say every falling star carries a wish looking for someone to believe in it." Alara tilted her face to the heavens. The stars seemed alive, whispering, shimmering, pulsing like hearts. "I want one to wait for me," she said suddenly. Her father smiled. "What do you mean?" "I want one that won't fall until I'm ready for it." He chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Then you'll need a patient star." Alara nodded, eyes wide and full of sky. "Then I'll call it the star that waits." Years later, by the time she was 16, her father was gone. The sea had taken him one stormy night while his boat was still tethered to the dock, a cruel, sudden squall that came and left without warning. After that, Alara stopped going to the beach at night. She stopped looking up, too. The stars felt like traitors, silent witnesses that had watched everything happen and done nothing to stop it. She worked at the lighthouse now, where her mother used to bring hot tea and books when Alara was little. It was an old structure, white stone. Glass cracked at the corners, but it still shone every night. Like a heartbeat in the dark. Sometimes she wondered if the light reached him, her father, wherever he'd gone. The letter. One foggy evening, Alara found a letter tucked beneath the door of the lighthouse. The handwriting was elegant, looping, unfamiliar. To the keeper of the light. "Every night I watch your beacon sweep across the sea. And I think of a story my mother told me when I was small, about a star that never fell. She said it waited for the right wish. The right heart. Do you believe in such things?" A stranger from the other shore. Alara frowned. A prank, maybe. Still, she tucked the letter into her journal. That night, she climbed to the top of the lighthouse. The lantern flame danced in the glass dome. Beyond it, the sea stretched endlessly, dark and whispering. She looked up. And there it was. One star, brighter than all the others, hanging alone above the horizon, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Her breath caught. "The star that waits," she whispered. The stranger's second letter. A week passed before the second letter arrived. To the keeper. "The star you keep watch with, it has a name. You know, in my family, we call it Seraphiel. My grandfather said it's the star that remembers. When ships are lost at sea, it keeps their light until someone calls it home again. If you ever speak to it, tell it I'm still waiting. 2. Your stranger." Alara reread the letter until the ink began to smudge. A star that remembers. A stranger who waited. For the first time in years. She climbed down to the beach and stood barefoot on the sand again. The tide lapped at her ankles. Above her, the same star burned, brighter than ever. Steady and unblinking. And just as she whispered, "Seraphiel," the wind shifted. The air shimmered, faintly. But enough for her to feel it. The sea turned silver. And for one impossible second, the star seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Then, far out on the horizon, a faint glow flickered, blue, like lightning trapped underwater. The boy from the sea. The next morning, the tide brought something strange. A boat, small, wooden, cracked along the edge, had washed up near the rocks. Inside it lay a boy no older than 20. Drenched, pale, but breathing. When Alara found him, she thought at first he was dead. Then his chest rose, shallow but steady. She dragged him to the lighthouse, wrapped him in blankets, and waited until his eyes opened. They were gray, like storm clouds, and when they met hers, something inside her stirred, something that felt both new and painfully familiar. "Where am I?" he asked. Voice hoarse. "The coast of Liran," she said. "You were in a boat. It drifted here. He frowned. Liren, that name sounds old. It is, she said. So are most of us who stay here. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I've been waiting for a long time. The name he chose. He didn't remember his name. Or where he came from. Or how he got there. When Alara asked, he just said, I remember a light, a sound like waves, and then falling. She gave him tea and a dry sweater. And as he sipped quietly, she said, then we'll have to call you something. He looked toward the window. The sea glimmered faintly, and above it, that same lone star shone. Call me Seraph, he said. Alara froze. Why that name? He shrugged. It just feels right. Outside, the wind rose, and the lighthouse light flared bright enough to paint his face in gold. And for a heartbeat, just one, she could have sworn the star above the horizon pulsed in answer. Strange light. In the nights that followed, Seraph helped her repair the lanterns, polish the glass, and send out the nightly beams. He moved quietly, gracefully, as though the world beneath his feet wasn't quite the one he belonged to. He knew things, names of constellations, the old sailors' songs, the way to predict storms by listening to the pitch of the wind. Who taught you all that? She asked one evening. He smiled without looking at her. Maybe the sea did. Sometimes, she'd catch him standing at the balcony, staring up at the same single star, his expression full of longing. Do you ever feel like something's waiting for you? He asked her once. Yes, she whispered, but I think it's been waiting for too long. The dream. That night, Alara dreamed of the sea. Not the sea as it was, but as it used to be. Alive with color and song. The waves shimmered with silver light, and in the sky above, thousands of stars hung like lanterns. In the center of the sea stood Seraph, barefoot, his skin glowing faintly, his eyes full of starlight. Do you remember me now? He asked. I don't know you, she said. He smiled sadly. You did, once. You called me down when you were 9 years old. Then he looked up at the heavens, and the brightest star began to fall. The awakening. Alara woke gasping, the echo of waves still in her ears. She ran to the window. The sea was calm, but above it, the lone star was gone. Her heart hammered. She ran to the balcony, searching, scanning the horizon. And then she saw him, Seraph, standing barefoot on the sand below, looking up at the sky. The air shimmered around him. His skin glowed faintly in the moonlight. Seraph, she called, what's happening? He turned, eyes soft and endless. It remembered me, he said quietly. The star, it waited too long. And then, with a sound like wind sighing through glass, he was gone. The light returns. 3 days passed. The sea was silent. The sky felt emptier than ever. Then, on the 4th night, as Alara lit the beacon again, she saw it. The star had returned, brighter, closer, pulsing slowly like a living heart. And in its light, for the briefest moment, she saw him, Seraph, standing beside her, his hand resting on the lantern glass, whispering, I'll wait again, if you will. The wind carried his voice away, but the words stayed, echoing inside her like a second heartbeat. The sea that remembers. The sea had always whispered to Alara, but now it had begun to speak. It wasn't in words, exactly, it was in the hush between waves, in the sigh that rose through the cracks of the lighthouse stones, in the rhythm of water against the shore. Every sound seemed to say the same thing. He's not gone. But how could she believe that? The night Seraph vanished, she'd seen him disappear, light and air and starlight unraveling into the wind. And yet, when she climbed the lighthouse steps the next morning, she found something impossible waiting for her. A feather. Not white, not gray, silver, metallic, faintly warm to the touch, as if it had been bathed in sunlight. The feather and the map. Alara turned the feather in her fingers as she sat by the lantern's glow. It pulsed faintly, like it was alive. When she brushed it against the wooden desk, thin lines of light appeared, spreading like cracks in glass, forming a faint, glowing pattern across the surface. A map. Her breath caught. The shapes were unmistakable. The coastline of Liren, the small bay where she'd found Seraph's boat, and a single glowing dot far out to sea. At the edge of the light, Words appeared, soft, shimmering, in handwriting that wasn't hers. Where the sea remembers, I will wait. Her hands trembled. Seraph, she whispered. The legend of the remembering sea. Alara rode her bicycle into town the next morning, the map still glowing faintly in her pocket. She went straight to the one place that never changed, the old library near the square. Mrs. Alwyn, the librarian, looked up from her desk. Back again, lighthouse girl? She said with a smile. Alara nodded. Do you have anything on Lyran myths? About stars or the sea remembering people? Mrs. Alwyn chuckled. You sound like your father. That name made Alara flinch. He used to ask about that too? Oh, constantly. He was obsessed with the story of the star who waited. Said it was real. Alara froze. There's a story with that name? Mrs. Alwyn nodded, rummaging through a drawer and pulling out an old blue book, its edges frayed with salt. The Star That Waited. Collected Tales of Lyran Coast. Volume 4. Alara's pulse quickened as she opened it. Inside, the tale read, there was once a star who fell in love with the sea. But the sea is a jealous lover, she pulls everything she loves beneath her waves. So when the star came down, she broke him apart and scattered his light into the water. Yet one fragment of the star refused to fade. It waited at the bottom of the sea, remembering the sky. It is said that when someone calls its name with a true heart, the star returns, if only for a little while, to finish its promise. At the bottom of the page, someone had scrawled a note in pencil. J. Harper, 1994. Alara's throat went dry. Her father's handwriting. The Lighthouse Journal. That evening, Alara climbed to the top of the lighthouse again, her father's name burning in her mind. Had he known about Seraph? About the star? She searched through the old logbooks in the cabinet, weather notes, tide schedules, reports, nothing unusual. Until she found a worn leather journal tucked behind the drawer. Inside were sketches, maps, constellations, diagrams of stars. And between the pages, a letter. If you're reading this, Alara, it means I didn't make it back from the sea. But don't be afraid, the ocean doesn't take, it remembers. Years ago, I followed a light that called to me. It wasn't lightning or reflection, it was alive. I think it was him, the waiting star. If he ever finds you, don't be afraid of the impossible. Some promises are older than the sky. Dad. Alara's hands shook as she held the letter. Her father had seen Seraph's light. He believed in the same myth. She looked out the window toward the horizon. The single bright star shimmered faintly. Was it you? She whispered. Were you calling him all this time? The fisherman's warning. At dawn, Alara went down to the docks. Old Tomas, the fisherman who'd known her father, was mending nets by the pier. Tomas, she said, did my father ever tell you about a light in the sea? He looked up sharply. Why? Because I think I've seen it too. His weathered face darkened. Child, don't go chasing that. The old ones say the sea remembers everything, but it doesn't forgive. Men who follow a light never come back the same. She hesitated. Do you believe that? He stared at the horizon for a long time. I saw your father's boat vanish into that light. The next morning, the sea was calm, too calm, like she'd swallowed her secret and gone back to sleep. The decision. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She sat on the lighthouse balcony, staring at the feather, now faintly glowing again. The map shimmered across her desk like a living thing. Where the sea remembers, I will wait. She looked at the horizon. The same single star blinked, once, twice, like a heartbeat. She packed a lantern, her father's compass, and the feather. Then she climbed down the cliff steps to the old rowboat tied near the rocks. The tide was high, silver under moonlight. Just one look, she whispered, then I'll come back. She untied the rope and rowed toward the open sea. The glow beneath. The waves were gentle at first, then grew unnaturally calm. The stars above reflected perfectly on the surface, as if she were rowing through the sky itself. Then she saw it, the glow. Faint, deep below the waterline, pulsing softly, blue-white, like the color of breath on glass. She leaned over, heart pounding. The light seemed to call to her, not in words, but in feeling. Recognition, longing. Alara, it seemed to whisper. She gasped. the oar slipping from her hand. Then the sea opened beneath her. The descent. There was no splash, no struggle, only silence. Alara sank through cool water that shimmered like glass. The surface above her glowing faintly. The world below her turning brighter. She should have been afraid, but she wasn't. A warmth spread through her chest, pulling her downward, and then, out of the light, she saw him. Seraph. He stood, floated, in the water before her, surrounded by shards of light like broken stars. His eyes were calm, his hand reaching out. You came, he said softly. She tried to speak, but the words dissolved into bubbles. He smiled. Don't be afraid, the sea remembers you too. The heart of the sea. When her feet touched something solid, she realized they were standing in an impossible place, a landscape of coral and light, glowing softly beneath the ocean. It was like standing inside a living memory. Shapes of boats drifted like ghosts. Stars flickered between the waves, their light trapped in the water's heart. This is where the lost things go, Seraph said quietly. Every star that falls, every promise the sea keeps, every memory that refuses to die. Alara looked around, breathless. My father? Seraph's eyes softened. He was here once. The sea took him in, then let him go. He carried the memory of me to you. She felt her throat tighten. So, you were waiting for me? I was waiting for whoever would remember. He said, the wish you made as a child, it found me. I couldn't fall until you called me home. The stars' truth. The light around them grew brighter. Seraph lifted the silver feather. This is what remains of me. My heart, broken long ago when I fell. Every century, it glows when someone still believes. He pressed the feather into her palm. It was warm, pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. When you found me, I remembered what it was to be human. To wait, to hope. She looked at him, tears blurring the water around her. Can't you stay? He smiled sadly. The sea is my prison and my home. I can only rise when someone believes, but belief always fades. She shook her head. Then I'll keep believing. You can't hold the sky forever. Alara. I can try. The return. The light began to dim. The current shifted, swirling upward. Seraph stepped closer, pressing his forehead to hers. When the world forgets, I'll wait again, but this time, I won't wait alone. Then everything turned to light. Alara gasped as she broke through the surface. The cold night air filling her lungs. The sea around her was calm again. The boat floated nearby, glowing faintly with silver light. She looked up. The star had returned to the sky, brighter than ever. And when she whispered, Seraph, it pulsed once, like a heartbeat answering her own. End of Part 2. The Sea That Remembers. Alara has followed the light beneath the waves and discovered the truth. Seraph is the fallen fragment of a star that can return only through belief, and through her. He has remembered what it means to love and to wait. But now, the sea is stirring again. And the longer Seraph's light stays in the sky, the more the balance between heaven and earth begins to break. The star and the tide. The world felt different after that night. The air shimmered faintly, like the horizon was breathing. When Alara walked along the cliffs, the sea no longer whispered, it sang. And above her, the lone star burned brighter than any other in the sky. The ripple. For 3 nights, the light didn't fade. Townspeople began to notice. Children pointed to the sky and whispered that a new star had come to stay. Fishermen spoke of tides that rose too high, of waves that glowed in the dark. Alara kept her secret close. Every time she looked at that star, her chest tightened, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, one evening, when she returned to the lighthouse, she found something impossible waiting on the windowsill. A drop of seawater glowing like molten glass. When she touched it, it pulsed softly, and a voice filled the room. You shouldn't have brought him back. The voice wasn't Seraph's. It was deeper, older, like the sea itself had learned to speak. Alara froze. Who's there? The water trembled. The tide remembers everything, and everything it remembers, it eventually takes back. Then the light faded, leaving only a wet mark on the wood. The keeper's warning. The next day, Alara went to the town's edge, where an old woman named Mira lived, the last of the coast's tidekeepers. People who were said to listen to the ocean's dreams. Myra's small house smelled of salt and smoke. Shells hung from the ceiling like chimes. You've seen him, haven't you? Mira said before Alara even spoke. Alara's heart skipped. Who? The fallen one. The light that waits below. Alara nodded. He's not gone. I brought him back. He was waiting. Mira slammed her cane against the floor. Then you've broken the balance. The balance? Myra's eyes were clouded but sharp. The sea gives and the stars guide. They are not meant to meet. When one crosses into the other, the world shifts. The tides rise higher. The storms grow stronger. And the heavens begin to lose their place. Alara shook her head. You don't understand. He's not a monster. He's a memory. Mira interrupted. And memories that refuse to fade always demand something in return. The storm that shouldn't be. That night, the storm came without warning. The sky split open, thunder like breaking glass, lightning crawling across the sea. The lighthouse shuddered as wind slammed against its walls. Alara ran up the spiral steps, the lantern in her hand flickering wildly. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw it, the sea glowing again, thousands of lights swirling beneath the surface. But this time, they weren't calm. They were rising. From the heart of the storm, a shape emerged, tall, shifting, made of water and shadow. The outline of a woman, her eyes deep as the abyss. The sea herself. Alara Harper. The voice boomed, echoing through wind and rain. You've taken what was mine. Alara clutched the railing, rain whipping against her face. He doesn't belong to you. The sea's form tilted its head. Everything that falls to me becomes mine. Even stars. Lightning split the sky. The waves clawed higher, nearly reaching the cliff. Give him back, the sea demanded, or I will drown what remembers him. The message in the rain. Alara backed away from the window, heart pounding. She grabbed the feather from her desk. It glowed fiercely in her palm, pulsing like it could hear the sea's fury. Then a voice whispered inside her head, soft and familiar. Alara, don't be afraid. Seraph, she gasped. The sea is angry because she remembers too much. She loved what she could not keep. That is her curse. Then what can I do? Find the heart of the tide. It's where her memories sleep. If you free them, she'll let me go. How? You'll know when you see it. The voice faded, leaving only the sound of rain hammering the roof. The journey beneath. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally broke, Alara packed what she needed, her father's compass, the feather, and the map that had once glowed across her desk. Now, its lines shimmered with a faint blue light, leading not to the middle of the sea, but to a place below it. At dawn, she set out again in the rowboat, the horizon glowing pale gold. The water was still strange, too smooth, too quiet. The air smelled like silver rain. As she rowed farther, the sky above her began to blur, the line between heaven and sea dissolving. Then the boat slowed. Below her, a spiral of light glowed beneath the waves, vast and hypnotic. Like the eye of the world. Alara took a deep breath and whispered, I'm not afraid. Then she dove in. The heart of the tide. The descent was faster this time, as if the sea itself wanted her to come. She passed through layers of light and shadow until the water turned warm and gold. And then she saw it, an enormous coral structure glowing faintly at the ocean floor. Shaped like a heart beating in slow rhythm. It wasn't made of stone, but of memory. Shifting images swam across its surface, faces, ships, stars, moments frozen in time. She reached out. The moment her hand touched it, the world changed. The memory of the sea. She stood, not underwater, but on a beach that wasn't real. The sky above her shimmered like glass, and the sea glowed silver. A woman stood at the water's edge. Her eyes were infinite. You shouldn't be here, said the sea. Her voice was softer now, full of sadness. Alara stepped closer. You're angry because he left you. The sea's form rippled. He was mine. He fell into my arms. I gave him peace. He was never meant to stay. Alara said, stars don't belong beneath waves. And yet, he did. He learned to dream with me. Until you called him away. Alara's heart ached. He waited too long. He deserved to be remembered. The sea looked away. her tears falling as rain that turned to pearls. I wanted to forget him, she whispered, but I remember everything, every ship, every promise, every prayer drowned in my depths. I cannot forget what I love. Then let me remember for you. Alara said, let him go. The sea's form trembled, the world flickering around them. If I let him go, I'll lose my only light. Alara took a step forward, eyes steady. Then I'll be your light. The choice. The silence that followed was vast. The sea watched her for a long time, waves rising and falling like breath. Finally, she said, would you trade your memory for his freedom? If you forget him, the balance will return, he will rise to the sky, and I will sleep again. Alara's heart pounded. If I forget him, he'll forget me too? Yes. Alara looked at the horizon, where the reflection of that single bright star flickered faintly. She could still feel Serif's presence in her heart, like a thread of warmth. But she knew what she had to do. She smiled sadly. He waited for the world to remember him. Now it's my turn to wait. The sea's hand rose, shimmering like moonlight. Then close your eyes, child of the lighthouse. Alara whispered, tell him I kept my promise. And everything turned to light. The sky restored. When Alara opened her eyes, she was lying on the rocks near the lighthouse, the sun breaking through morning mist. The sea was calm again, silent, deep, and endless. And above her, the sky was full of stars, even though it was daybreak. The brightest one pulsed once, twice, then faded into the blue. Alara touched her chest. She didn't know why she was crying, or what she had lost, only that something beautiful had passed through her and gone. Inside the lighthouse, she found the silver feather on her desk, cold now, no longer glowing. She placed it in a jar beside the window. That night, when she went to sleep, she dreamed of a sky full of voices, calling her name, but when she woke, all she could remember was the sound of waves and a strange, peaceful feeling, like something waiting, just beyond the sea. The light that forgot to fade. Time, for Alara, became like the sea, endless, shapeless, always moving, always the same. She could no longer recall what she had lost, only that her heart sometimes ached in strange moments. When starlight touched the water. When the lighthouse lantern flickered just before dawn. When the tide whispered her name as if it were an echo from another life. She lived, she worked, she laughed, but inside her was a hollow brightness, something that wanted to remember. The lighthouse keeper. Years passed quietly. The townsfolk began calling her the keeper of the still light, because no matter the storm, the lighthouse never failed to burn. Children would come to visit her at dusk, asking to hear the sea stories. She always smiled and said, there's one I can't quite remember. When they asked what it was about, she'd pause, frown slightly, and then smile again. I think it was about something waiting. They would laugh, and she would laugh with them. But every night, when the last of the children had gone home, she would climb to the top of the tower, light the lantern, and stare at the horizon until her eyes blurred. Somewhere in the deep blue distance, a faint glimmer always pulsed. She didn't know why, but it made her feel safe. The visitor. One evening, as autumn winds rattled the shutters, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she saw a young man, soaked by rain, breathless from the climb up the cliff path. He wore a dark coat and carried a telescope slung across his shoulder. I'm sorry, he said quickly. My name's Orion Vale. I'm an astronomer. I was told you might let me stay the night. I'm here studying the Lyran skies. Alara blinked, startled. You came all the way up here in this weather? He smiled sheepishly. The stars wait for no one. Something in that phrase tugged at her heart, though she didn't know why. She nodded and let him in. The map of the sky. They sat by the fire as the storm roared outside. Orion spread his charts across the table, constellations, celestial paths, and star coordinates. I've been following something unusual, he said, tracing a line with his finger. A single star that doesn't belong to any known cluster. It appears once every generation, burns brighter than it should, then vanishes again. Alara frowned. Vanishing stars? That sounds lonely. He smiled. Maybe it's waiting for something. The words sent a shiver through her chest. She looked toward the window. The the storm clouds had thinned, revealing one bright point of light above the horizon. "That's the one," Orion said softly. "I call it Seriphus." The name made Alara's breath catch. Her pulse quickened. Seriphus. Why did that sound like something she'd whispered before? The dream that changed everything. That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind moaned around the tower. But it wasn't the storm that kept her awake, it was the name. Seriphus. It echoed in her head like an unfinished song. When she finally drifted into sleep, she found herself standing on the edge of the sea again, but it wasn't the same shore she knew. The sand glowed faintly blue. The waves rose like silver glass. And there, across the water, a figure stood waiting. He was made of light. "Do you remember me?" he asked. Alara tried to speak, but no sound came. Her chest hurt, not with fear, but with recognition. He took a step closer, the light around him pulsing softly. "You freed me once." Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know who you are." He smiled sadly. "Then I'll wait again." When she woke, dawn was breaking, and her pillow was wet with tears. The observatory on the cliff. Over the next few weeks, Orion stayed in the lighthouse, helping her repair the old glass lens and studying the skies from its balcony. They became friends, easily, naturally, as if they had known each other in another life. Sometimes, when he spoke, Alara would feel déjà vu, a flicker of warmth, an echo of something beautiful just out of reach. One evening, while adjusting his telescope, Orion said, "Do you ever wonder if stars can miss us?" Alara laughed softly. "I think it's the other way around." "Maybe it's both," he said. "Maybe memory goes both ways, from the ground to the sky." She turned to look at him then, and for a brief, impossible second, the air around him shimmered faintly, as if light itself remembered his face. The letter. One morning, while cleaning the lower storeroom, Alara found an envelope wedged beneath an old drawer. The paper was yellowed with salt. On the front, in faded ink, were the words, "For the one who waits." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a note, short, written in looping script she couldn't recognize. But that made her chest tighten all the same. "If you have forgotten me, then the world is right again. But if the sea ever sings and the stars ever weep, follow the light that refuses to fade." S. She clutched the letter to her heart, tears slipping down her cheeks before she understood why. When she looked out the window that night, the star Seriphus was brighter than ever, almost alive. The return of the tide. That evening, the ocean began to glow again, faintly at first, then brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the star above. Orion was outside on the rocks, his telescope forgotten, staring in awe. "Alara," he called, "come look at this." She ran to the edge of the cliff. The sea below shimmered like liquid starlight. Then she heard it, the whisper. "Alara." Her heart nearly stopped. The voice was the same one from her dreams, soft and aching with longing. She looked at Orion, but he was frozen, eyes wide, as if hearing it too. "Alara," the voice whispered again, "remember me." The wind picked up, swirling around them. The waves crashed higher. The air crackled with energy, both terrifying and familiar. And in the light reflecting off the sea, she saw two figures overlapping. Orion Vale, the astronomer. And beneath him, Seraph, the fallen star. The unraveling. The realization struck her like lightning. He had been reborn, scattered into the world as a man who looked at the stars. Still searching for himself. She stumbled backward, breath trembling. "You're him." Orion blinked. "What?" She stepped closer. "You're the one I." The word loved caught in her throat. He frowned, confusion and pain flickering across his face. "I don't understand." But the sea did. The waves rose higher, the glow deepening into gold. From the depths, a voice boomed, ancient, sorrowful. "He remembers what she forgot." Lightning flashed across the horizon. The tide surged, reaching for the cliff. Orion turned to her, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "Alara, what's happening?" She grabbed his hand. "It's the sea, she's calling us back." The awakening. The ground shook. The lighthouse lens shattered, scattering fragments of light into the storm. "Alara," Orion shouted, but his voice was fading. drowned by the roar of the sea. The waves rose like hands of glass and light, wrapping around them. And then, the world dissolved. The place between. Alara found herself standing on a glowing shore. The sky was neither night nor day, a twilight that breathed. Before her stood Seraph, fully himself now, radiant and human, his eyes burning like twin stars. "You found me," he whispered. She laughed through tears. "You found me." He reached out, brushing his hand against her cheek. "The sea tried to make me forget. But I remembered the sound of your voice, even when the world forgot your name." She touched his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath. "I gave up everything to free you." "I know," he said softly, "and I waited for you to remember." The light around them shimmered, the sea's voice echoing faintly across the horizon. Two who were meant to meet. Divided by memory. Bound by waiting. Seraph turned toward the light. "If we stay, the balance will break again." Alara nodded, tears glimmering. "Then what do we do?" He smiled. "We rise, together. This time." The ascension. The sea beneath them turned to light. Waves lifted, carrying them upward, dissolving into stars. As they rose, Alara saw the world below, the cliffs, the lighthouse, the endless ocean. She held his hand tightly. "Will I forget again?" He shook his head. "Not this time. You're part of the sky now." The last thing she heard before everything turned white was his whisper. "You waited. Now I will too." The sky that remembers. The lighthouse had been empty for many years. Waves crashed endlessly against the cliffs, and gulls wheeled through the mist, crying into the gray. To anyone passing by, it was just an old tower, a ghost of the past. Its lantern long dark. But sometimes, when the night was clear and the air smelled of salt and rain, the topmost window flickered faintly. A light, soft and golden, as if someone still kept watch. No one ever found the source. The new keeper. A young woman named Lyra arrived one autumn, carrying a worn satchel and a telescope. She was a student of astronomy from the city, quiet and curious. Her thesis was simple: to study the strange luminous anomaly over the Lyran coast, a pair of stars that appeared and disappeared with the tides. She set up camp inside the old lighthouse, brushing dust off the journals left behind. Most were blank, except one. On the first page, in faded ink, it said, "The stars remember." And beneath it, "For the one who will look up and see." The two lights. Every evening, Lyra climbed to the balcony and aimed her telescope at the horizon. There they were, two stars, side by side. One glowed a warm gold, the other pale and silver, almost like a reflection. The villagers had told her stories. Lovers turned to light. A curse of the sea. A guardian of the coast. But Lyra didn't believe in legends. Not yet. Still, sometimes, when she gazed too long, she could feel something. A pulse. A hum. As if those two stars were breathing, whispering in a language of light. Echoes in the waves. One night, while recording their coordinates, she heard something strange, faint, but real. A voice in the waves. It wasn't words, exactly, more like syllables shaped by the wind, half sung, half dreamed. She leaned out over the railing, hair whipping in the breeze. And then she heard it clearly. Just once. "Alara?" She froze. The name meant nothing to her, and yet, her heart stuttered as if it did. She wrote it down in her notebook without understanding why. That night, she dreamed of a woman with dark hair standing on a glowing shore, holding a hand made of light. The man in the mirror. Days turned to weeks. The nights grew longer, the stars brighter. Lyra began to notice something new, each time she observed the twin lights. Her telescope's reflection, her own eyes in the lens, would shimmer faintly, as if someone else were looking back. Once, she thought she saw a man's face, just for an instant, behind her reflection. Gentle eyes. Sad smile. A glow around him like a memory trying to live again. When she blinked, he was gone. But the telescope was warm under her hands, as if someone had just touched it too. The Journal of Orion Vale. In the lower storeroom, behind a collapsed shelf, Lyra found another journal, water-stained, almost ruined. Only the first few pages were legible. The light moves as if alive. It answers the tides. Perhaps it's not a star at all, but a doorway, something waiting to open. Another line followed, shakier, almost desperate. She doesn't remember me, but I think I was born remembering her. And below that, if I am lost again, may the sky carry our names. Lyra sat for a long time, tracing those letters. She didn't know why tears were running down her face. She only knew that somehow, she felt homesick for something she'd never known. The return of the star. That night, a storm rolled in. The ocean boiled and thunder split the sky, the same kind of storm that had taken the lighthouse keeper long ago. But this time, the light returned before the rain. Two streaks crossed the heavens, gold and silver, spiraling together, twisting like ribbons until they merged into one brilliant flare. Lyra gasped as the beam struck the sea, igniting the waves with radiant blue fire. The entire coast lit up as though dawn had arrived early. And in that light, for the briefest moment, she saw them. A woman and a man, standing hand in hand, both made of starlight. Smiling. Looking right at her. Then the light faded. But she heard one final whisper carried on the wind. Remember us, not as stars, but as waiting. The new constellation. Weeks later, when the skies cleared, Lyra looked up and saw something new. A third star had appeared beside the two, smaller, brighter, young. It formed a triangle in the sky. Locals began calling it the Heart of Waiting. Lyra, though, called it something else. She called it home. Because whenever she looked at it, she felt as though the stars were no longer far away, as if they had come back. Not as gods, not as myths, but as memory. As promise. As love that refused to vanish. Epilogue. The sky that remembers. Centuries later, sailors still tell the story. They say if you sail the Lyran coast on the longest night of the year and look straight up, you'll see three lights burning together. One golden, one silver, one pale blue. They say those are not stars, but souls. Two who waited for each other, and one who remembered them. When the sea is calm and the wind is kind, you can even hear the faintest song echoing across the tide, a lullaby the stars hum to the world. Love is not the end. It is the light that waits. And above it all, the heavens glow with the quiet pulse of something eternal. Not the end of a story, but the beginning of remembering.